The first Blade Runner movie opens up with a simple statement of space and time. Los Angeles, November 2019. A future not so far ahead from the movie's release in 1982, and indeed a future which has already passed for us. The second Blade Runner movie, released in 2017, similarly states a space and a time distanced 32 years from the movie's release, California 2049. What do such statements achieve in science fiction movies? In the case of the first Blade Runner movie, a familiar space, Los Angeles, is now rendered foreign because the time in which it is set has already passed and brought about the Los Angeles Americans are familiar with today. A Los Angeles vastly different from the one the movie portrayed 38 years ago. In the second case, a familiar space is set in a hypothetical future, but the distance in time is still short enough for people from 2050, for example, to reflect on Blade Runner 2049 as a movie about an imagined past. You see, both movies play around with a space and a time which are likely to exist in our own futures. People who have watched Blade Runner in 1982 are currently alive in Los Angeles, and I hope I don't jinx that one, but it's likely that people who have watched Blade Runner 2049 will exist in California in 2049. I think in both cases, the movies show an awareness of this proximity in time. So, in order to suspend this belief, the futures those movies imagine are likely to be dependent on how their present society imagines the future. The future of 1982 is dependent on how people in 1982 most likely imagine that future, and the same applies to the 2017 Blade Runner movie. What's important is to see how the current world betrays the imagined future of 1982, and what the imagined future of 2017 reveals about our present. What's potentially even more interesting is to see how Blade Runner 2049 urges us to reflect on a future that is yet to become our past, and thus a future which can be imagined otherwise. The world of the first Blade Runner movie presents a brightly illuminated cityscape against the backdrop of an absence of natural light. Throughout the movie, various scenes remind the viewer that the primary light source for most of the shots is the cityscape alone. Some absences in the world of Blade Runner even reveal themselves as such only because their replacement has been brought to the viewer's attention. Functionally, the snake in this scene
Is this a real snake?
Of course it's not real. Think I'd be working in a place like this if I could afford a real snake?
easily substitutes a quote-unquote real snake. The snake's realness only comes into question when some sentimental market value is assigned to it. The world of Blade Runner's 2019 Los Angeles, therefore, seems like one of unparalleled human ingenuity. Whatever the city seems to lack, for example, natural light and biodiversity, its population has already substituted to the point where the distinction between what has been invented by humans and what has been given by nature becomes either irrelevant in the case of the natural light example, or arbitrary in the case of the snake. Contrast this world of seamless substitution with the one in Blade Runner 2049. Not only are the absences apparent, but their manufactured counterparts only draw attention to the fact of those absences. For instance, the cityscape of Blade Runner 2049 doesn't flaunt the blinding lights of the first movie. The very horizon disappears as the grays of the city blend with a gloomy sky, and solar panels strewn across the landscape in the beginning of the movie reveal an ironic dependence on what the movie's world ostensibly lacks. It's not just that human inventiveness has failed to provide a proper substitution. What is built by humans tries to scrape the last remnants of that absence. Similarly, whenever the relationship between Joy and Kay appears genuine and heartfelt, attention is drawn to her manufactured nature. Artificiality haunts even the moment of her death.
Stop!
I do hope you're satisfied with our product.
In her last moments, Joy's realization that her affection for Kay and her life are coming to an end renders her existence, at least to a certain extent, very human. And yet, that same human authenticity is questioned soon after.
What a day, You look lonely. I can fix that. You look like a good show.
An element of disillusionment permeates Blade Runner 2049. By the time the sequel came out in 2017, it seemed less and less likely that the 2019 of the first movie would resemble the one shown in the movie. Never mind flying cars, the whole idea of a self-sufficient humanity which has complete control over its surroundings is out of the question. And this is why the presentation of 2049 California fascinates me in relation to a past imagining of a 2019 Los Angeles. When the movie's present will in due time most likely become the present and then past for a large part of its audience, the believability of the future the sequel presents hinges on how its present audience most likely imagines that future. Perhaps in 1982, it was plausible to imagine the future in terms of a steady journey towards innovation and progress. It was, after all, only in the late 80s when US media started paying closer attention to global warming. The future of 2049, however, is fueled by a present increasingly aware of the dangers of an encroaching climate disaster. In order to suspend disbelief, Blade Runner 2049 cannot afford to adopt the self-sufficient world of the 1982 movie. It needs to show the dependency on environmental conditions and how those conditions have a ruling hand over us instead of the other way around. The sharp contrast between the films has already pointed to a changed perspective on what the near future might look like to people in 1982 and 2017 respectively. But to what extent does Blade Runner 2049 make a realistic prediction about future environments? Reporters from Vox have collaborated with NASA and the Scripps Institution of Oceanography in order to predict as accurately as possible the temperature increases in US cities by 2050. Their findings draw on predictions that have proven accurate in the past 10 years from the time of the report. The observed temperature increases are closely related to more extreme weather events, such as more frequent swings from periods of intense rain to extreme drought, which will put extra stresses on dams and farmers, and are likely to lead to more severe mudslides. From the small patch of farming ground with its precarious needs in the beginning, to the drastic shifts in weather conditions as the narrative progresses, Blade Runner 2049 shows an acute awareness of most, if not all, of those probable environmental conditions. Intentionally or not, the second film takes a sobering look at what a possible future could look like, and this also touches upon my second point of interest. To put all those predictions in film makes them frighteningly palpable. The visual art form possesses a certain unique immediacy of emotional response. It is one kind of experience to read an article on police brutality, and a whole other to watch a video of it. Both of those experiences have their significant role in the larger conversation we need to be having about race and inequality. But the videos are what puts the context of police brutality in the urgency of a here and a now. Similarly, a look at the world of Blade Runner 2049 positions the viewer in an engulfing state of awareness of a certain place and a certain time. The immediacy of what the film shows us positions us in the here and now of the environment of Blade Runner 2049. We feel the surge of emotions as Kay learns that his memories were manufactured, and we sense a type of catharsis as this disillusionment brings about the importance of present actions as opposed to past memories and what determines Kay's humanity. We probably imagine that the characters themselves must experience those emotions. Of course, I am being very specific, and you might as well have had different thoughts and experiences, but any emotional or intellectual involvement with the film does require that the viewer be in and with the film at the time of viewing. This is the immediacy of the visual art form that I want to point at. There is, however, another layer of experience that is specific to Blade Runner on top of the here and now. As we watch, our attention is also drawn to places and times that point to a familiar space, but in a different time. I have already touched upon this, but the point I'm trying to make now is that the inherent awareness of the here and now of cinema emphasizes this distance in time and directs us to a there and then in our own world. We may look at flying cars and laugh at how ridiculous and naive future expectations are, but we also look at a time that is not so far away from our own. We look at miles of desolate land and seemingly pointless fields of solar panels, and we wonder nonetheless. We don't know with certainty what the then and there will look like, but we have a notion of what it might look like, and with that also comes the dread in the earlier laughter about flying cars. I thought it was important to make this video because I couldn't help but notice the importance of art, which shows us what we don't want to see. I find a kind of consolation in it. If we are willing to agree on a vision of the future we do not want, then there is all the more agreement in the work towards what we might want from it. Watching the two Blade Runner films is a very interesting experience at the point of making this video in 2020. One has already shown us how vastly different the future looks from the side of a future that has passed, and the other is yet to confirm or deny our fears. From that point of view, there is much more hope to be derived from a bleak prediction, since it is still in our present grasp to prove it wrong.